The body was still warm when I stumbled upon it. Blood pooled across the white marble like spilled ink, creeping toward the toes of my worn canvas shoes. I froze in the doorway of the East Wing corridor, my cleaning cart forgotten behind me, one hand instinctively pressed against the small swell of my belly. 5 months pregnant, and I'd just seen my first corpse. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. The chemical smell of floor polish that clung to my uniform was nothing compared to the metallic tang of blood that now filled my nostrils. Everything in me screamed to run, but my legs had turned to stone. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be here. Mrs. Brennan had assigned me the guest wing tonight, but I'd heard voices, laughter, the clink of glasses, and had taken the long way around to avoid disturbing anyone important. Now I wished I'd walked straight through whatever party was happening. The man on the floor wore an expensive suit now ruined. His eyes stared at nothing. And standing over him, perfectly still, was Valenzo. I'd been working at the Rosewood estate for 6 weeks and had seen the master of the house exactly 4 times. Each time I'd made myself invisible, ducking into doorways or alcoves, keeping my eyes down, my movements quiet. The other staff had warned me on my first day. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't ask questions. Don't look him in the eye. And whatever you do, don't let him notice you. Too late. His head turned slowly, deliberately, until those piercing gray eyes locked onto mine. In his right hand, casual as if he were holding a glass of scotch, was a gun. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look angry. He looked calm, calculating, like he was already 3 steps ahead of whatever was about to happen next.
Run.
Every survival instinct, I had screamed the word. But where would I go? The estate sprawled across 50 acres of private land. There were gates, guards, cameras. And I was 5 months pregnant, broke, and desperate enough to take a job I'd known was dangerous from the moment I'd seen the security screening process. My ex-boyfriend had left me the day I told him about the baby. My mother was dead. My father, whoever he was, had never been in the picture. I had $200 in my bank account and a baby coming in 4 months. The Rosewood estate paid triple what any other housekeeping job offered, and they didn't ask too many questions. I'd known something was wrong with this place. I just hadn't cared enough to walk away. Now I couldn't walk away, even if I wanted to. Valenzo took a step toward me. Not hurried. Not aggressive. Just purposeful, like a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to go. He was younger than most men with his kind of power, early 30s at most, with dark hair slicked back to reveal sharp, aristocratic features. A tattoo curved along the left side of his neck, partially hidden by his collar. Some kind of design in black ink that marked him as something other, something dangerous. His suit was immaculate despite what he'd just done. Not a drop of blood on him. Esther. My name in his mouth made my blood run cold. He knew who I was. Of course he did. He probably knew everything about me. My desperation. My pregnancy. My complete lack of options. I tried to speak, but my throat had closed. My hand pressed harder against my belly, protective, futile. He stopped 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than a month of my salary. His eyes dropped briefly to where my hand rested against the burgundy fabric of my maid's uniform, then back to my face. You're the new girl. It wasn't a question. His voice was quieter than I'd expected, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Esther William, 23, 5 months pregnant. No family. No one looking for you. Each fact he recited felt like a nail in a coffin. Mr. Valenzo, my voice cracked. I was just going to clean the guest rooms. I didn't see anything. I swear I didn't see anything. The lie hung between us, pathetic and transparent. A slight smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a problem he was deciding how to solve. Behind him, the body lay motionless. Blood continued its slow spread across pristine marble. Somewhere in the house, music played softly. Normal life continuing while mine hung in the balance. You're shaking, he observed, his tone almost conversational. I was. My entire body trembled violently, adrenaline and terror warring in my veins. He took another step closer. I flinched backward and immediately hated myself for it. Show fear to a predator, and you're already dead. But I couldn't help it. I was terrified. Of him. Of what I'd seen. Of what was about to happen to me. Please, I whispered. I have a baby. I need this job. I won't say anything. I promise. I know you won't. He moved faster than I could track, one hand wrapping around my upper arm, firm but not painful, while the other rose to cup the side of my face. The gesture was almost tender, if you ignored the gun still hanging loosely from his right hand. His thumb brushed along my cheekbone, wiping away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Then he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered 6 words that would change everything. If you tell anyone, I'll bury you beside him. The world tilted. My knees buckled, but his grip on my arm tightened, keeping me upright. He held me there for a long moment, making sure his message had sunk in, that I understood the terms of my survival. When he finally released me and stepped back, his expression had shifted into something I couldn't read. Not quite pity. Not quite interest. Something calculating and cold that made my skin crawl. Clean this up, he said, gesturing to the body with his gun before tucking it into a holster hidden beneath his jacket. Then go to your quarters. Someone will bring you dinner. We'll talk in the morning. He walked past me without another word, his footsteps echoing down the marble corridor until they faded into silence. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, staring at the body, at the blood, at the evidence of a violence I'd never imagined being close to. My hand remained pressed against my belly, where my baby grew, innocent and unknowing. I should run. I should call the police. I should do something, anything except what I was about to do. But I knew the truth even then, standing in that hallway with my heart hammering and my future crumbling. I had nowhere to go. No one to protect me. And Valenzo knew it. So, I did what I'd always done. What desperation and poverty had taught me to do. I survived. I went to the supply closet and got what I needed. And I cleaned up the blood like he'd told me to. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 months earlier, the morning I arrived at the Rosewood estate, I'd been desperate enough to ignore every red flag. The job posting had been vague. Private household seeking discreet domestic staff. Excellent compensation. Must pass background check and sign non-disclosure agreement. The salary listed was 3 times what I'd been making at the diner, and they offered housing. For someone 3 months pregnant with $56 in her checking account and an eviction notice taped to her apartment door, it felt like divine intervention. I should have known better. The interview had taken place in a stark office downtown, conducted by a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Brennan, the head of household staff. She'd looked at my application, looked at me, and asked one question. Are you the kind of person who asks questions you shouldn't? No, ma'am. Good. You start Monday. No discussion of my pregnancy. No concerns about my ability to work. Just clinical efficiency and a contract so thick I'd needed 10 minutes just to sign all the places marked with yellow tabs. I hadn't read it carefully. I'd been too afraid they'd change their minds. The estate itself was beautiful in a way that felt almost threatening. Manicured lawns. Classical architecture. Wrought iron gates that required 3 separate security checks to pass through. As the car that had been sent for me wound up the long driveway, I'd counted at least 6 men in dark suits positioned around the property, all wearing earpieces, all watching. This wasn't just wealth. This was fortress-level security masquerading as luxury. But the room they gave me was bigger than my entire previous apartment. The salary was real. And for the first time in months, I had health insurance that might actually cover my prenatal care. I told myself I could ignore the warning signs. Keep my head down. Do my job. save money, have my baby, and get out before anything bad happened. I'd lasted exactly 6 weeks before everything fell apart. The first time Valenzo spoke to me directly was 3 days after I started working at the estate. I was in the library, standing on a ladder to dust the upper shelves, when I felt it. That prickling sensation at the back of your neck that tells you you're being watched. I turned slowly, careful not to lose my balance, and found him standing in the doorway. Just standing there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of something amber-colored, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. My heart stuttered. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to become invisible, but it was too late. He'd already seen me, already decided I was worth his attention. "You're new," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in that smoke-dark voice that seemed to fill the entire room despite its quietness. "Yes, sir. I started Monday." My voice came out steadier than I felt. I climbed down from the ladder carefully, acutely aware of my slight waddle, the way my uniform stretched across my growing belly. His eyes dropped to my stomach, lingered there for a moment that felt like an eternity, then returned to my face. "You're pregnant." Heat flooded my cheeks. I nodded, suddenly ashamed in a way I couldn't explain. Standing in this library that probably cost more than most houses, wearing a second-hand uniform, carrying a child I couldn't afford, in front of a man who radiated the kind of power that could crush me without a second thought. "How far along?" 3 months, sir." He took a sip of his drink, still watching me over the rim of the glass. "The father? Not in the picture." The words came out clipped, defensive. I immediately regretted the tone. But Valenzo just nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Mrs. Brennan knows about the pregnancy?" "Yes, sir. It was in my application." "And she hired you anyway?" Another sip. Another long, assessing look. "Interesting." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, he turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "What's your name?" "Esther, sir. Esther William." He repeated it slowly, like he was committing it to memory. "Esther." Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of his cologne and the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted. That night, I found Maria in the staff kitchen. She was the only maid close to my age, a dark-haired girl from somewhere in Eastern Europe who'd been working at the estate for almost a year. She took one look at my face and poured me a cup of tea, without asking. "He spoke to you," she said quietly. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "In the library. He asked about the baby." Maria's expression darkened. She glanced toward the doorway, checking we were alone, then leaned closer. "Listen to me, Esther. Whatever you do, don't let him see you. Not really. You stay invisible. You stay quiet. You disappear." I tried. He just... "No." Her grip on my wrist was surprisingly strong. "You don't understand. Mr. Valenzo, when he notices someone, when he decides they're interesting." She trailed off, her eyes distant with some memory she wouldn't share. "Just trust me. Stay out of his way." But it was already too late for that. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw him everywhere. In hallways, I was cleaning. Passing through rooms, I was dusting. Always watching, never speaking, but always there. It felt deliberate, calculated, like he was studying me, learning my patterns, my routines. The other staff noticed too. I caught their worried glances, heard whispers cut short when I entered a room. Even Mrs. Brennan, who'd been nothing but briskly professional since I'd arrived, pulled me aside one morning. "Mr. Valenzo has requested that you be assigned to the East Wing," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You'll clean his private quarters, his office, the library." My stomach dropped. "Mrs. Brennan, This isn't a discussion, Esther. These are his instructions." So I cleaned his spaces, hyper-aware of every movement, every sound. I worked faster than necessary, desperate to finish and escape before he appeared. But he always appeared, standing in a doorway, sitting at his desk, reading in the library, and always watching me with those calculating gray eyes. He never spoke. never acknowledged my presence beyond that weighted stare. Somehow that made it worse. I felt like prey being circled by a predator who was simply deciding when to strike. Maria's warning echoed in my head every day, "Don't let him see you." But Valenzo had already seen me, and for reasons I couldn't understand and didn't want to examine, he decided I was worth his attention. I just didn't know yet what that attention would cost me. The call came at 11:30 on a Thursday night. I'd been asleep for maybe an hour when my phone buzzed on the nightstand, Mrs. Brennan's name glowing on the screen. "There's been an incident in the north drawing room. Wine spilled on the carpets. I need you to handle it immediately before it stains." I wanted to cry. My feet ached, my back throbbed, and the baby had been kicking all evening, making sleep nearly impossible. But I pulled on my uniform and gathered my supplies, because that's what you did when you were desperate and replaceable. The house at night was a different creature. Shadows pooled in corners that seemed harmless during the day. The security lights created harsh angles across marble and wood. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I made my way through the labyrinth of hallways toward the north wing. I should have taken the main corridor. Mrs. Brennan had been explicit about approved routes for staff, especially at night. But I heard voices from that direction, male laughter and the clink of glasses, and something told me to avoid it. Some instinct for self-preservation that made me take the long way around through the East Wing instead. That instinct saved my life. And ruined it. The East Wing was supposed to be empty. Mr. Valenzo's private quarters were there, but he was entertaining guests in the main house. I'd seen the cars in the drive, heard the music drifting through the ventilation system. So when I turned the corner into the corridor that connected to the north wing and saw light spilling from one of the rooms, I froze. Voices. Low, tense, angry. A man pleading in Italian, words I couldn't understand but whose desperation transcended language. Then silence. Heavy, terrible silence. I should have turned around. Should have found another route. Should have done anything except what I did. I crept forward, drawn by morbid curiosity and a sick feeling in my stomach that something was very wrong. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see expensive furniture, oil paintings worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime, and blood. So much blood. It pooled across white marble, spreading outward in a crimson tide that caught the light from the chandelier above. The man lying in the center of it wore a suit that had probably cost thousands. His eyes stared at nothing, mouth open in permanent shock, and a hole in his chest still leaked red. And standing over him, perfectly calm, was Valenzo. He held a gun loosely in his right hand, like it was an extension of his body, nothing more remarkable than a pen or a glass. His suit was immaculate. Not a drop of blood on him. He looked down at the corpse with the same expression I'd seen him use while reading the newspaper. Mild interest, nothing more. I must have made a sound. A gasp, a whimper, something that gave me away. Because his head turned slowly, deliberately, until those gray eyes locked onto mine. Time stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the animal terror flooding my system. Every cell in my body screamed to run, but my legs had turned to stone. I stood there in the doorway, my cleaning supplies forgotten, one hand pressed instinctively against my pregnant belly, and stared at the man who held my life in his hands. Valenzo didn't look surprised. Didn't look angry. He looked calculating, like I was a problem he was already solving in his head. He took a step toward me, unhurried, and I watched him close the distance between us with the inevitability of a nightmare. Esther. My name in his mouth was a death sentence. I tried to speak, to apologize, to beg, but only a strangled sound emerged. Behind him, the body cooled. Blood continued its slow spread. And somewhere in the house, music still played, normal life continuing while mine ended. He stopped inches away, so close I could smell his cologne mixed with something metallic I now recognized as blood. His free hand rose to cup my face, thumb brushing along my cheekbone almost tenderly. Then he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered the words that would haunt every moment that followed. "If you tell anyone, I'll bury you beside him." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the body.
The blood.
Valenzo's calm expression as he'd threatened to bury me alongside a corpse I'd helped him dispose of. I'd cleaned up the blood. Actually cleaned it. Scrubbed a dead man's essence from marble floors while my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the brush. Valenzo had watched for a few minutes, then left me there with instructions to report to his office at 8 in the morning. Now I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the staff quarters, watching the sky lighten through my small window, and tried to figure out how to survive this.
Run.
The thought pulsed through my mind with every heartbeat. But where? I had $53 and a baby coming in 4 months. No car. No family. And I'd just become an accessory to murder. At 7:55, I walked to his office on legs that barely supported me. He was already there, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, reading something on his phone. He looked up when I entered, gestured to one of the leather chairs across from him. I sat because my knees were shaking too badly to keep standing. "How did you sleep?" he asked, as if we were having a normal conversation. As if last night hadn't happened. "I didn't, sir." "Understandable." He set his phone down, folded his hands on the desk, and studied me with those penetrating gray eyes. "We need to discuss your living arrangements." My heart stopped. This was it. He was going to kill me. Or throw me out.
Or,
"You'll be moving to the guest house. Private quarters. Better suited for someone in your condition." I stared at him, unable to process the words. "Sir, the staff housing isn't appropriate for a pregnant woman. The guest house has its own kitchen, bathroom, proper security. You'll be more comfortable there." Comfortable. The word felt obscene given the circumstances. "I don't understand. It's very simple, Esther." He leaned back in his chair, still watching me with that unsettling calm. "Last night was unfortunate. You saw something you shouldn't have. That makes you a liability. But it also makes you valuable." Valuable. The word came out as barely a whisper. "You're smart enough not to run. Desperate enough not to talk. And pregnant enough that no one will question why I'm providing you additional protection."
He paused.
"It's for your safety. And the baby's." The way he said it made my blood run cold. Not a kindness. A strategy. What if I want to leave? His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Do you?" We both knew I couldn't. Not anymore. Not after what I'd seen, what I'd done. He owned me now, as surely as if he'd put a collar around my neck. "The guest house," I said quietly. "When do I move?"
"Today.
"Mrs. Brennan will help you pack." The guest house was beautiful. Of course it was. Valenzo didn't do anything by halves. It was a small cottage on the edge of the estate property, surrounded by manicured gardens and wrought iron fencing that looked decorative, but was definitely designed to keep people in as much as out. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen stocked with food I hadn't bought, a living room with furniture nicer than anything I'd ever owned. French doors opened onto a private patio. It would have been a dream if it weren't a cage. Mrs. Brennan helped me settle in with brisk efficiency, her face carefully neutral. She didn't ask questions. Didn't comment on my sudden promotion from staff quarters to guest accommodations. Just showed me where everything was and left me alone. Alone. That was the worst part. In the staff quarters, there'd been other maids. Maria to talk to. The background noise of other lives. Here, there was only silence and the terrible awareness that I was completely isolated. The first doctor arrived 3 days later. A woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Dr. Chun and proceeded to give me the most thorough prenatal examination I'd ever had. She didn't ask why I was living in the guest house of a Mafia boss's estate. Just checked the baby's heartbeat, took my blood pressure, and left me with vitamins I couldn't have afforded on my own. "Mr. Valenzo wants to ensure you receive the best care," she said before leaving. Not asking. Ensuring. I saw him rarely those first weeks, but I felt his presence constantly. Cameras in corners I pretended not to notice. His men walking the property at regular intervals. The way groceries appeared in my kitchen without me ordering them, always exactly what I needed. He was taking care of me, providing for me. making sure I had everything necessary for a healthy pregnancy. Everything except freedom. The nightmares started 2 weeks into my stay at the guest house. Always the same. Blood spreading across white marble. Dead eyes staring at nothing. Valenzo's voice in my ear, promising to bury me. I'd wake up gasping, my hand pressed against my belly where the baby kicked, as if even in sleep I needed to protect the one innocent thing in this nightmare. It was during one of these sleepless nights at 3 in the morning that I made the mistake of searching online. I told myself I was just curious, that I needed to understand what I'd gotten myself into. But the truth was I needed to know if there was any way out, any loophole, any escape route I hadn't considered. I typed his name into the search bar with shaking fingers. Valenzo. The results made my stomach turn. Most of it was vague. Philanthropist. Real estate mogul. Major donor to political campaigns and children's charities. Photos of him at galas, always impeccably dressed, always surrounded by important-looking people. On the surface, he was respectable, powerful but legitimate. But buried deeper in forums and true crime blogs and archived news articles was the truth. Allegations that never led to charges. Witnesses who disappeared before trials. A federal investigation that had quietly dissolved 2 years ago after the lead prosecutor died in a car accident. Valenzo wasn't just wealthy. He was untouchable. I was reading a Reddit thread about his alleged connection to organized crime when I heard the knock. Soft but deliberate. My heart stopped. At 3 in the morning, nothing good came from a knock at the door. I considered not answering, but the cameras would have already shown I was awake. And Valenzo had made it clear that avoidance wasn't an option. He stood on my doorstep in casual clothes I'd never seen him wear before. Dark jeans, a black sweater that made his gray eyes look almost silver in the porch light. Without the suit, he looked younger, more human. Somehow that made him more frightening. "You're researching me," he said. Not a question. The laptop was still open on my coffee table, the screen visible through the window. Of course he knew. Of course he was watching. "I just wanted to understand," I whispered. "Understand what?" "What I saw. Who that man was. Why you?" I couldn't finish the sentence. Valenzo stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, closing the door behind him. In the small space of the guest house, he seemed even larger, more overwhelming. He moved to the laptop, glanced at the screen, then back at me. "His name was Adrian Russo," he said calmly. "He worked for me for 6 years. And for the last 8 months, he was working for the FBI." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "An informant," I breathed. "Yes." Valenzo sat down on my couch, utterly at ease, while I stood frozen by the door. He was going to testify. Names, dates, bank accounts. Everything he'd learned while pretending to be loyal. "So you killed him." "I protected what's mine." His voice was matter-of-fact, no remorse, no justification. Just statement of fact. "The same way I'm protecting you." My laugh came out harsh, bitter. "Protecting me? You threatened to bury me. And you're still alive, aren't you?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching me with that calculating expression I'd come to dread. "Do you know what would happen if anyone discovered you witnessed that night? If the authorities found out there was a pregnant maid who could testify against me?" Ice flooded my veins. "You'd be the most valuable witness in federal custody. Protected, relocated, set up with a new identity." He paused. "Until someone from my organization found you. And they would find you, Esther. They always do. You're saying I'm safer with you than against you. I'm saying you're alive because I decided you were worth more alive than dead. But that calculation can change." I sank into the chair across from him, my legs finally giving out. "What do you want from me?" "Your silence. Your loyalty." His eyes dropped to my belly. "Your trust. You can't buy trust with threats." "No," he agreed. "But I can buy it with protection. With security. With everything you need for that baby you're so desperate to save." He stood, moving toward the door, then paused.
Adrian Russo talked.
"That's why he's dead. You're smart enough not to make the same mistake." After he left, I sat in the dark for a long time, my hand on my belly, feeling the baby move. I finally understood. I wasn't a prisoner. I was insurance. A witness who could destroy him or protect him, depending on which side of silence I chose. And Valenzo had made it very clear there was only one choice that ended with both of us alive. The envelope arrived with breakfast 3 days later. I'd grown accustomed to the routine. Food appeared on my doorstep every morning, prepared by someone in the main house, always exactly what I'd been craving without ever asking. Today it was French toast with strawberries, the kind of indulgent breakfast I hadn't been able to afford in months. The envelope sat beside the plate, cream-colored and expensive, my name written across it in elegant script. Inside was a single document and a check that made my hands shake.
$52,000.
Made out to me. Signed by Valenzo. The document was simpler. A contract, really, though it was dressed up in language about employment terms and non-disclosure agreements. But I could read between the lines well enough. Stay silent. Stay here. Raise your child under my protection. In exchange, financial security, healthcare, safety. Everything I desperately needed 6 weeks ago. Everything that had driven me to take this job in the first place. I was still staring at the check when he knocked. This time I expected it. This was how Valenzo worked. He gave you time to process, to realize your options, to understand that resistance was futile. Then he appeared to collect your surrender disguised as agreement. Have you read it? He asked, stepping inside without invitation. It was becoming a pattern. Yes. And I held up the check. This is generous. It's practical. He moved to the window, looking out at the gardens bathed in morning sunlight. With his back to me, he seemed almost vulnerable. Almost human. You need money. I need your cooperation. It's a simple transaction. Nothing about this is simple. He turned, and there was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not quite sympathy, but an acknowledgement of the impossible position we both occupied. You're right. It's not simple, but it is necessary. For you. For both of us. He crossed the room, sat down across from me at the small dining table. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. Let me be very clear about what I'm offering, Esther. This isn't charity. It's not kindness. It's survival. My survival or yours? Both. He leaned back, studying me. You stay here. You have the baby. I provide everything you need. Medical care, security, education for the child when the time comes. A life most single mothers couldn't dream of providing. In exchange for my silence. In exchange for your partnership. The word felt obscene. You're not my prisoner. You're under my protection. There's a difference. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Is there? Because it feels like I'm still trapped. Just in a nicer cage. You're free to leave any time you want. The words were soft, dangerous. Walk out that door right now. I won't stop you. My heart hammered. Was he serious? Was this a test? Of course, he continued, voice still casual. Without my protection, you become a liability again. To me and to yourself. The people who would want to silence a witness don't care that you're pregnant. They don't care that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They just care that you saw something that could put me in prison. There it was. The truth beneath the offer. I could leave, but I'd be leaving as a target. A loose end. A problem that would need to be solved. So, I don't really have a choice, I said quietly. Everyone has choices, Esther. Some are just easier to live with than others. He pushed the contract across the table toward me. Sign it.
Stay.
Let me protect you and your child. Or don't, and take your chances with whatever comes next. I looked down at the document. At the check. At the life he was offering wrapped in the illusion of free will. And if I sign, what then? Then you become part of my household. Officially. You'll want for nothing. The baby will want for nothing. All I ask is your loyalty and your silence. That's all. The sarcasm in my voice was weak, defeated. That's everything. He stood, pulling a pen from his pocket and setting it beside the contract. Think about it. You have until this evening. After he left, I sat there for hours, the pen in my hand, the contract in front of me. The baby kicked, a reminder of what was at stake. Not just my life anymore. A whole other person who depended on the choices I made. I could refuse.
Could walk away.
Could try to disappear or go to the authorities or find some impossible third option. But we both knew I wouldn't. By sunset, my signature was dry on the paper, and Valenzo owned me in every way that mattered. The months that followed blurred together in a strange dance of captivity and care. My belly grew. The baby became real in ways that terrified and awed me. I felt every kick, every hiccup, every restless movement in the middle of the night. Dr. Chen visited weekly, monitoring everything with meticulous precision. The nursery appeared in the second bedroom without me asking, furnished with a crib that probably cost more than my first car, walls painted a soft sage green I'd mentioned, liking once in passing. Valenzo heard everything, knew everything, anticipated my needs before I voiced them. It should have felt like kindness. Instead, it felt like being studied under a microscope. He visited more frequently now. Not every day, but often enough that I started listening for his footsteps on the path, started tensing whenever I heard a knock. Sometimes he'd stay for hours, sitting in my living room like this was normal, like we were normal. He'd ask about the baby, about my health, about what I was reading or watching. Casual conversation that pretended we weren't predator and prey. Other times he'd barely speak at all. Just appear at my door with takeout from restaurants I'd never be able to afford, or books he thought I'd enjoy, or once, inexplicably, a sketch pad and charcoal pencils because I'd mentioned years ago wanting to learn to draw. I didn't remember telling him that, which meant he'd had someone dig into my past, learn my forgotten dreams, catalog my desires. The attention was suffocating. "You look tired," he said one evening, appearing just as I was making dinner. 6 months pregnant now, moving slowly, my back aching constantly.
Hai fine.
He moved behind me, so close I could feel the heat of him, and his hands settled on my shoulders. I froze. He'd never touched me like this. Never crossed that particular line. "You're tense," he murmured, and his thumbs pressed into the knots of muscle at the base of my neck. I should have pulled away. Should have told him this was inappropriate, that I wasn't his to touch. But God help me, it felt good. My body betrayed me, relaxing under his hands, leaning back slightly into the pressure. "Better?" His voice was low, intimate, dangerous. "Yes," I whispered, hating myself for the admission. His hands stilled for a moment, then continued their work, methodical and careful. "You don't have to be afraid of me, Esther." I almost laughed. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because you're dangerous. Because you killed a man and threatened to kill me. Because you own me." The words tumbled out, months of suppressed terror finally breaking free. His hands dropped. He stepped back, and I immediately missed his warmth. Hated that I missed it. "I don't own you," he said quietly. "Don't you?" I turned to face him, anger overriding fear for the first time since that terrible night. "You control where I live, what I eat, who I see. You monitor my doctor appointments. You know everything about me. If that's not ownership, what is it? Protection. It's the same thing."
No.
He moved closer again, crowding into my space, forcing me to look up at him. "Ownership would be keeping you locked in a room. Protection is giving you freedom within safety. There's a difference." Freedom? The word tasted bitter. I can't leave. Can't talk to anyone outside this estate. Can't make a single decision without wondering if you'll approve. "You can do all of those things."
But you choose not to.
"Because you know I'm right." His hand rose to cup my face, the gesture terrifyingly tender. "The world outside these gates is more dangerous for you than anything inside them. I didn't create that reality. I'm just the only one honest enough to acknowledge it." My throat tightened. Because he was right, and that was the worst part. I was safer here, in this gilded cage, than I'd ever been on my own. "I hate you," I whispered. "I know." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "But you need me." And right now, that's enough. He left after that, and I stood in my kitchen for a long time, one hand on my belly, trying to understand when protection had started to feel like something else. When his presence had become less terrifying and more necessary. The baby kicked hard, as if in protest. I was 7 months pregnant, and falling into a trap I couldn't escape. Worse, I wasn't sure I wanted to anymore. The plan formed slowly, desperately, during sleepless nights when the baby's kicks kept me awake and Valenzo's words echoed in my head. You need me. Maybe I did. But I was drowning in that need, losing myself in the comfortable prison he'd built around me. Every day I stayed, I became more dependent, more complicit, more his. I had to try. Even if it was futile. Even if it was stupid. I had to know if escape was possible, or if I'd already surrendered so completely that freedom was just a word I remembered but could no longer reach. Maria was the key. I hadn't seen her since moving to the guest house, but I knew she still worked in the main house. I'd caught glimpses of her through windows, heard her voice occasionally when I walked the gardens. And Maria had been kind once, had warned me about Valenzo before everything fell apart. I waited until Dr. Chen's weekly visit. She always came alone, always parked near the guest house, always left her car unlocked while she examined me. It was the only gap in Valenzo's surveillance I could find. Everything looks good, Dr. Chen said, packing up her equipment. Baby's heartbeat is strong. You're measuring right on track for 32 weeks. 8 weeks left. 8 weeks until I became even more trapped, tethered to this place by a child who deserved better than a mother who'd witnessed murder and signed her life away. After she left, I moved quickly. I'd packed a small bag days ago, hidden under my bed. Just essentials. Some cash I'd saved from the allowance Valenzo provided. A change of clothes. My phone, though I suspected it was monitored. I knew the security patterns now. 3 guards rotated through the property on 2-hour shifts. The cameras had blind spots in the gardens near the east fence. I'd study them during my walks, pretending to enjoy the roses while really mapping escape routes. It was foolish. Probably suicidal. But I had to try. I made it to the fence. Actually made it that far, my pregnant belly making me clumsy but adrenaline pushing me forward. The iron bars were tall, but there was a section near the service gate that was lower, manageable. I was halfway over when I heard the footsteps. Going somewhere? Not Valenzo. One of his men, the one with the scar across his eyebrow who always looked at me like I was a problem waiting to be solved. He stood beneath me, arms crossed, expression bored. Please, I gasped, still straddling the fence. Please, I just need to. Get down. Now. I considered jumping.
Considered running.
Considered every stupid option that would probably get me, or the baby, hurt. Then I saw the others approaching. 3 more guards, moving through the garden with the efficiency of men who'd done this before. I climbed down, shaking so badly, I nearly fell. One of them caught my arm, not rough but firm, and led me back toward the guest house like a child being returned after running away. They didn't take me to the guest house. They took me to the main house, to Valenzo's office, where he sat behind his desk looking less angry than I'd expected. He looked disappointed. Somehow that was worse. Leave us, he said to his men. They disappeared immediately, closing the door behind them. The silence was suffocating. I'm sorry, I started, but he raised a hand, cutting me off. Where were you going to go, Esther? His voice was quiet, controlled. Where exactly did you think you could hide? You're 8 months pregnant. You have no money, no family, no one who would protect you from the consequences of what you know. I had to try. Why? He stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace that made my heart race. Why run from the one person who's kept you alive? Who's given you everything you need? Because it's not enough. The words exploded out of me, months of suppressed rage finally breaking free. Because I can't breathe here. Because you've taken everything from me. My choices, my freedom, my... Your what? He was in front of me now, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Your poverty? Your desperation? Your complete lack of options? I didn't take those from you, Esther. I saved you from them. You imprisoned me. I protected you. His hands gripped my shoulders, not painful, but inescapable. Do you understand what would have happened if you'd made it over that fence? If you'd actually gotten away? I couldn't answer. Couldn't speak past the fear and fury warring in my chest. I would have found you, he said softly, each word deliberate. And I would have brought you back. Because you're mine now. Not my prisoner. Not my property.
Mine.
The mother of the child I've protected. The woman I've kept alive when anyone else would have disposed of you the night you saw something you shouldn't have. I didn't ask for this.
No.
But you accepted it. You signed the contract. You stayed. His grip tightened slightly. You don't get to change your mind now. The contractions started at 2 in the morning, 3 weeks before my due date. I'd been having false labor for days, Braxton Hicks contractions that came and went, preparing my body for what was coming. But these were different. These stole my breath, radiated from my back to my belly in waves that left me gasping. I called Dr. Chen first. Then, because I had no choice, I called Valenzo. He arrived before the doctor, still dressed from whatever he'd been doing, his shirt partially unbuttoned, hair less perfectly styled than usual. He took one look at me doubled over on the couch, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite fear, but close. How far apart? He asked, already moving toward me. 5 minutes. Maybe less. Another contraction hit, and I gripped his arm without thinking, nails digging into expensive fabric. He didn't flinch, just held me through it, his other hand settling on my back, supporting me. When it passed, he helped me to the car with a gentleness I hadn't known he possessed. The private hospital was 30 minutes away. We made it in 20, Valenzo breaking every speed limit, one hand on the wheel and the other holding mine while I breathed through contractions that were coming faster now, harder, stealing rational thought. You're going to be fine, he said, and I wanted to laugh.
Fine.
As if anything about this situation was fine. Labor was brutal. 15 hours of pain that rewrote my understanding of suffering. Dr. Chen was there, along with 2 nurses who asked no questions about why a pregnant maid was giving birth in a private wing with armed guards stationed outside the door. Valenzo stayed. Through all of it. Didn't leave once. Even when I screamed at him, blamed him, told him I hated him through clenched teeth. He just stood there, letting me grip his hand hard enough to leave marks, his face unreadable except for the tension in his jaw. One more push, Dr. Chen said. Come on, Esther. One more. I pushed with everything I had left, and then suddenly there was a cry. High and indignant and absolutely perfect. It's a girl, Dr. Chen announced, and my world narrowed to that sound. They cleaned her quickly, wrapped her in a soft blanket, and placed her in my arms. She was tiny, red-faced, furious at being forced into the world. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her fists waving at the injustice of birth. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Hi, baby girl, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I'm your mama. I looked up and found Valenzo staring at us with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Awe, maybe. Or possession. Or something more complicated that I couldn't name and didn't want to examine. Can I? He asked quietly. I should have said no. Should have held her close and refused to let the monster who'd trapped me touch my daughter. But I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and some part of me understood that this moment was inevitable. I handed her to him. He took her carefully, like she might shatter, cradling her against his chest with surprising confidence. She quieted immediately, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger. He looked down at her with something that might have been tenderness if I believed him capable of such a thing. She's perfect, he murmured. And in that moment, watching him hold my daughter, I understood with brutal clarity that I would never leave.
Not now.
Not ever. Because he wasn't just holding my baby. He was holding every reason I had to stay silent, to obey, to accept this life he'd built around me. What will you name her? He asked, still not looking away from her face. I'd thought about names for months, had a list of possibilities. But looking at her now, at the way she trusted him instinctively, at how easily she'd fit into his arms, Only one felt right. Grace, I said. Her name is Grace. Because if I was going to survive this, I would need grace. The unearned kind. The kind that let you accept impossible things and call them necessary. Valenzo finally looked at me, and I saw my future in his eyes. Not love, not freedom, but safety purchased at the cost of everything else. He handed Grace back to me, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange. You did well, he said softly. Both of you will want for nothing. I promise you that. I believed him. That was the terrible part. I believed every word. As I held my daughter, feeling her heartbeat against my chest, I made a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I would stay. Not because I wanted to, but because survival sometimes meant accepting the unacceptable. I would raise Grace here, in this beautiful prison, under the protection of the man who terrified me. I would find power in surrender. Learn to navigate his darkness. Extract what freedoms I could from the margins of captivity. I wouldn't love him. I couldn't. But I would accept him as the fixed point around which my life now orbited. Thank you, I heard myself say, and hated how easily the words came. Valenzo's hand settled on my shoulder, familiar now, almost comforting in its possession. You're safe now, he murmured, echoing the words from that first terrible night. As long as you remember whose you are. I looked down at Grace, her tiny face peaceful now, unaware of the compromises her existence demanded. I remember, I whispered. And I did. I would never forget. But I would survive it. We both would. That was the only choice I had left.